Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Giants San Francisco edition podcast. Of course, guys, this is big. It is a crossover extravaganza. I am one of your hosts, Javier Reyes, at Javapeno on Twitter, JAVIIPENO. Also, go check out my work at justbaseball.com, where I write about the Padres and general baseball, and my other podcast, Baseball versus the World, for general baseball silliness and fun. And it should be, hopefully, that podcast back next week. And my co-host, as always, for the 50th time that we've done this crossover since 2020, Ben Kaspick, host of Locked On Giants. Sir, how are you doing on this fine Friday afternoon?
Little depressed, Javi. Little depressed. The Giants once again, outside of 2021, just been mediocre baseball for way too long. And I know the Padres living large right now coming into this series, but a lot on the line still. They haven't clinched anything, so it's gonna be
Absolutely.
fun.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about all the storylines of the Giants and exactly what you're alluding to, which is the franchise kind of issues right now and this role reversal that all of a sudden the Padres are the ones that seem to be well run. We're going to talk about all that, including some pitching matchups as well. But first, guys, let me just tell you today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. And let me tell you, Ben, the Padres are just running things when it comes to apparently just having the big, exciting, acquisitions and having being the story of the division, dare I say. I know that the Dodgers, okay, because every mainstream media outlet is going to talk about them and Ohtani and all that, but the Padres have really been like one of the stories of baseball this year because they've just had a complete reversal in their batted ball luck in terms of their ability to hit and drive runners in. They have been by far and away, which is one thing we talked about in the preseason, which is high leverage stuff usually does not, if it's an extreme. So if you're number one or if you're last, that usually doesn't replicate the exact same way the next year. It just doesn't. If you're in the middle, you lose some players. Okay, there's obviously a lot of variables to this, but the Padres kept their roster together. Yeah, they lose Juan Soto, but it was basically the same. You still have Tatis, you still have Bogarts, you still have Manny, you still have, even Ha-Seong Kim to an extent. You still had really talented batters, and they've just had a total reversal, right? So that is also, yes, in fairness, something to look out for, I think, for the Padres next year. But Ben, for the Giants, this is a team that made probably the more flashier offseason moves between these two teams. Obviously, the Padres did the Juan Soto trade, but the Giants, they bring in Blake Snell, they bring in Matt Chapman, they bring in Jung Ho Lee, they bring in probably some other players I'm forgetting. And instead, right now, as it stands in the standings, the Giants are 69-72, very clearly seem to be out of this playoff race. So, like, what's going on, man? What happened in Giants land?
It's hard to explain really how this roster is pretty much performing the same as last year's roster because they did make a bunch of improvements, and you have had a good season, a very good season out of Matt Chapman, who, by the way, just got extended for 6 more years
Mm-hmm.
yesterday, or actually two nights
Was
ago.
2 nights ago, yeah.
Yeah, and Blake Snell, who obviously Padres fans are familiar with, he did miss like 2 months, two separate
Mm-hmm.
1 month stints on the IL, and was horrible for like a few starts in between, and then has been amazing since July, um, outside of a 1 inning start yesterday. But anyway, it's hard to explain. Lately, they have just been horrendous hitting in clutch situations. So that's funny that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
However, they showed this on like Giants broadcasts a lot, that like going back a couple months, basically, they've been like the worst team hitting in those clutch situations. And yet their record over that span is actually over 500. And so it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
weird. Like they've like 21-17 or something, while being the worst team hitting with runners in scoring position during that span. So that's
Mm-hmm.
weird. Um, I think the pitching has kind of picked it up over that span. But honestly, looking at the numbers and just kind of trying to figure out what's gone wrong, lately run scoring has been an issue, but overall, they have like their earned run average as a team is 420, and that ranks 21st in baseball. And when you play at Oracle Park, half the time, you just can't be. And when you have Logan Webb, Blake Snell, and then Robbie Ray has come back, and we just
Mhm.
thought that pitching would be a strength for this team, but that you can't be 21st and play in one of the more pitcher friendly ballparks. And that to me has been the biggest issue for them, has actually been run prevention and not run scoring.
Yeah, and and just to give some context, the Padres first this year in high leverage situations, according to Fangraphs, in WRC plus 150, and then the second closest is the Twins at 123. So just Padres fans, keep an eye on that. And then the Giants, they're 26 with an 85 WRC plus. So that kind of explains some part of how just vastly different these two teams are. But you bring up the signings and whatnot. In fairness, the Jung Ho Lee injury has been completely forgotten about. I mean, I almost forgot about it until I brought it up that they acquired him this season. So it feels like that some things didn't go their way. I don't know, necessarily what. I don't know how to describe the Snell situation, but in the sense of this is a guy who's always been a ramp up dude, always. So I don't understand why people were freaking out that he was not freaking out that he was bad, but they were like, "Yep, I told you last year was a fluke." It's like, no, it's just that he needs ramp up time, right? And if he's golden the whole way, he would to Cy Young, which is just that's why I think he's such a fascinating pitcher, where he's always going to be solid, in overall value, because he will give you the great starts, but he's going to be so bad for a little bit that he's not going to be able to be an ace for a little bit at a time. But I think that the Giants are just in a really weird spot. The Padres haven't played them in a while, and I think that with the Matt Chapman extension, that's really interesting. I got to ask you, what what is what's the plan here with the Giants? And I ask that in the sense of not just, oh, we need to, win, obviously. But you look at what they've done, and they had the 2021 season, which is becoming more and more of this as big of an anomaly we've ever seen, basically, at least
Yeah.
in the modern era. Just all these older players, obviously Buster Posey, guys like that. That was a surprise. But yeah, Darren Ruff, you had all that sort of stuff like just break through, and they haven't been able to tap into that again. And I do want to ask you another question about Snell, but why do you think that is? What's going on, Ben? What's going on? What's the current state of the Giants exactly right now?
Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out, and I think the front office is trying to figure it out too, and they haven't been able to
Mm,
because you look at the last, this they had they had a major change firing their president of baseball operations in after the 2018 season, and so now this is the sixth season under this front office, which is led by Farhan Zaidi, who came over from being the general manager of the Dodgers. And so there were high expectations. Some people were not a fan of, the analytics, blah, 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 blah. But like you're talking the GM of the Dodgers, who, the Dodgers are obviously consistently excellent, at least in the regular season.
hmm
Um, and yet, so I'm talking, the 2021 season, like you said, looks like a huge outlier. 2022, 2023, 2024, years 4, 5, and 6 under this regime. You
hmm
would think by that point they would have been able to turn things around because when he took over, it was not a good situation. It was an expensive and bad team. It was an expensive team with a lot of big underwater contracts. And anyway, now the roster has been completely turned over. So there's no excuses anymore. And the results in years 4, 5, and 6, there's something like 5, 6 games under 500 combined in the last
hmm
3 seasons. One 500 finish in 2022, exactly 500, and then under 500 a little bit last year, and then under 500 a little bit right now this year with 21 games left. And so yeah, the plan is to try to win, but they just haven't been able to do it. I think there's been a lack of bold moves. They've made
hmm
efforts. They did agree to a $350 million deal with Carlos Correa. They
hmm
went after Aaron Judge. They went after Shohei Ohtani. They went after Bryce Harper even in 2019.
hmm
Landing any of those guys can make a huge difference. But, the Padres, meanwhile, they're able to make, like, if we've said this before, but if you kind of combine some of what the Padres do with some of what the Giants have done well, like
hmm
finding guys like Lamont Wade, um, Mike Yastrzemski, some of not like complementary players, but then you
hmm
add that to what the Padres have been able to do. Really, they haven't developed enough impact talent. that's kind of been the main issue is that they haven't drafted and developed impact talent. A young player coming up like a Tatis, just
Hmm.
and then this year with Jackson Merrill, guys like
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
make just such a huge difference. And then you add a signing like a Manny Machado and a Xander Bogaerts and stuff like
Hmm.
that. That's where they've been lacking. It's just been too
Hmm.
much around the edges and not enough impact ultimately.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about those storylines, and I'm going to ask Ben some questions about his team that he'll never see coming. I mean, he probably did. It's not that crazy of a question, but we will get into it in just a second, guys. But first, I need to talk to you about our good friends over at Ibotta. And here's the thing: summer may be over, but when it comes to saving money, everybody's all in for it. Yeah, you're not going to the beach necessarily anymore. I mean, hopefully you never were because the beach is obviously horrible, as we've always discussed. But even still, Ibata, it helps you save money for whatever your trip is. So if you're going to the beach, if you're going to a baseball game, what happens basically is you go and get money back based on what you have spent, at a bunch of other different places. It's a free app, lets you earn cash back every time you shop. And the average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of a Giants game, of a Padres game, and get you some great tickets too. You can get refreshments. You could go to the movies. You could go cross country road tripping. That stuff adds up. And let me tell you, other apps, they do not give you the points that amount to much. And with Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You could save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. And right now, Ibotta is offering a nice little sweet treat for our listeners, $5 just for trying the app by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. So check that out in the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back. It's segment number 2, thriving and vibing, as always, on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Giants podcasts. With the Giants, Ben, I mean, you know what? Let me just start with this. Should they have traded Blake Snell at the deadline? Because this is a guy who has a player option for next season, and it feels like at the trade deadline, things were not really going well for the Giants. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been some cool developments. Tyler Fitzgerald has been pretty good in the 70-ish or so games that he's played this year. He's been nice. You've even gotten some stuff out of Lamont Wade Jr., who's always been, I think, a really solid, underrated player, even if, he's not an everyday sort of guy necessarily. But even still, you've gotten at least some value from these guys. But they did trade away Jorge Soler, you know what I mean? And that makes me wonder, why did you think you want to keep this guy for next year? Do you think that means they know that they might have some good prospects coming up? Personally, I don't know. I feel like I haven't heard a lot about the Giants farm in a while. The Kyle Harrison thing hasn't quite evolved, I think, into what they needed him to be, at least this year so far. What is kind of the thinking there? Do you think they should have traded him or not?
Well, I think with the benefit of hindsight, it's a clear yes that
Mm,
they should have traded him because at this point, Fangraphs has their playoff odds at 0.1%. And I've been on record saying that even that feels a little bit generous, like because they pretty much need to win out, which,
mm-hmm,
what are the 21 and 0, 20 and 1, like something like that, just
mm-hmm,
to get to like upper 80s slash 90 wins. So knowing now what we know, which is that they haven't played great in, since the trade deadline, then it's an easy yes because he's going to opt out and
mm-hmm.
you can't give him the qualifying offer. I yeah, the Padres must have given it to him last year. Yeah, they did. Um, and but when I look back at what were the standings at the deadline, I'm looking at the standings on July 31st, which must include because the deadline was on the 30th, I think. So they were just 5 games back. And when I say just, that's pretty significant, actually. So, um, yeah, looking back on it, at the same time, I understood like they had committed a lot to this year's roster,
Mhm,
and they felt like, Robbie Ray had just come back.
mhm,
Logan Webb was pitching well. Blake Snell was pitching great. All of a sudden, you've got those three guys. Jorge Soler, he wasn't doing great, and he hasn't done great in Atlanta either. And so I think that was more about the Braves were willing to take that contract, which had 2 more years on it. And I think the Giants were just like, we we're going to jump at the opportunity to get rid of this contract, and that they can, try to spend that money elsewhere in the offseason. But at the time, it was kind of a tough call. And then, they did talk about how the offers that were being made weren't necessarily these like impact, like one prospect who's like an impact, prospect, like I don't know, I don't want to say Jackson Holiday or something like that,
mhm,
because maybe that's totally unrealistic, but it was
mhm,
more like a package of like five prospects that
mhm,
isn't necessarily having that one headliner. That's what the Giants, president of baseball operations said they were getting in terms of offers on Snell, and that it wasn't worth it to them to make
mhm.
that move. And so at the same time, this is what I'm saying. Like they kind of don't make that move, and it's never really worked out for them. They've been non-aggressive, and it hasn't
Yeah.
worked out. And so, yeah, I think there's a case to be made for sure that they should have moved Snell.
Yeah, I am just totally on the side of they should have moved him. I think this guy would have been an awesome trade deadline piece because everybody knew he's done the ramp up. We're good, and I think you could use that for leverage. Yes, it's possible he'd be a rental, most likely opting out after this year. But even still, I just don't know exactly what's going on with the Giants. And for you to trade away Jorge Soler, who you had signed to a deal, it's just like it's almost like you're half giving up. And to me, you never want to be in a position where the Padres were in this position not too long ago, where granted they did, similar to the Giants, they didn't like go crazy and trade away their assets and capital in order to still compete last year. But Josh Hader, I think, is the perfect comparison right here because electric player, don't get me wrong. And then what happened? He was basically a moot point. It didn't matter in the second half. Not only on top of, he had some weirdness with not wanting to pitch all the time, but even still, that was clearly a mistake. And you probably could have gotten at least maybe one top 100 guy. Does that mean that I think that player is going to be amazing? No, but it's about asset accumulation. And to me, this has been a Giants front office that's just been very inconsistent. Yes, they've been a little bit unlucky. That is fair. And no, it's not because of the dumb narratives out there about San Francisco, the city. It's just they've been a little bit unlucky in the sense that the Correa situation happened, in the sense that Aaron Judge really did just want to stay with the Yankees, even though the Giants were ready to just throw the bag at him. Same thing for the Padres, too. But I just think that at some point it becomes a problem if you're not bringing in big time free agents, and if the farm system. Now, don't get me wrong. We just mentioned Tyler Fitzgerald, Patrick Bailey. Yes, he's not a great hitter, at least by regular hitter standards, but he's an electric defensive player and probably the best defensive catcher in baseball. So they've had some stuff. Don't get me wrong, but it just feels like a team that I don't know what their identity is. I don't know what their plan is, and I like Matt Chapman. I think he's a really solid player. I thought it was funny. People were kind of roasting him a little bit when he said, "Yeah, I've talked to players like people want to come to San Francisco," and it's like, okay, this is the Giants are becoming. For any of my NBA fans out there, the New York Knicks for a long time, they were always talking about how they want to save New York, right? And they want to do this, and they have cap space. And then nothing ever materialized, right? They ended up making their team better through a bunch of other different reasons, but they were never able to swing into all these big fish. And it feels like the Giants have been in that position for a while. And not to mention, that's really just annoying as a fan to be like, you keep telling us that something's coming and we're going to make a splash and we don't. And then you could have gotten something for Blake Snell and you did it. And then on top of that, this is just a team that I just I forgot my point over the course of this, but I just really think that they are just in a not an awful spot. They're not in an awful spot, but it just feels like the fans are growing a little bit tired. And if 2021 doesn't happen, does Farhan Zaidi even have a job still? Maybe not. And not to mention all the weird like the PA announcer, that person getting left off and then signing Snell the same day as if you wanted people not to pay attention. I think the Giants fans are paying attention. I think they're realizing that this team, it's just not as well structured as it was before. And I think that conventional wisdom And the standard has usually been the Giants. They're a great org. They're really smart. You know who else had that standard for a while? The St. Louis Cardinals. You know who low-key stinks and has been horrible at developing talent for a while? The St. Louis Cardinals. So I am fearful that the Giants are heading towards that road where they're just kind of not what they used to be as an organization.
I think that's fair. I mean, that's a good comparison. I think the Cardinals although the Cardinals, they've stuck with their long time,
Yeah,
Mazalek
and they haven't even tried. They were how long? Both you and I feel like talked about like I think they need a pitcher, and the Cardinals were like, no, we're just gonna roll into the playoffs with Adam Wainwright at 44 years old, and then they finally signed a pitcher, and everyone's like, yeah, you should have done that. We've been waiting. It's like I literally checked the stats like recently where that team. It's like yeah, for like 4 to 6 years now, it's been like go sign a pitcher, and they were like Steven Matz.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you doing? At least the Giants try. So I would tell that to fans and say, at least there's a semblance of the reason we're not getting players isn't because we don't want to sign some players. It's because it's hard to attract them. We don't have the full funds right now. While the Cardinals are like, I don't know. I think our owner wants another Maserati or something. So
yeah. And one other thing I want to add is that you mentioned Tyler Fitzgerald, and I think correctly so, but also Elliot Ramos has had a breakout season for them. And so you've got a couple of, rookies who I think Ramos is technically not a rookie, but he's just 24 and he's had a big year for them. And so you've suddenly got Elliot Ramos in the outfield. You've got Jung-Hoo Lee coming back. You've got Tyler Fitzgerald, so that's two young players having a breakout season. Jung-Hoo Lee is a young player. He's only 25 years old right now, I think. Maybe he just turned 26. And we haven't seen yet what he can really do. There were flashes of it this year, but he got hurt pretty early on. And also Patrick Bailey, like you mentioned. And so there are, some pieces there with Bailey, Ramos, Fitzgerald, Lee, and Chapman. There are some young guys, and then a Logan Webb. That's a great piece signed for 4 more seasons after this year. And then Robbie Ray has an opt out, and he can be electric. We've seen he's currently on the IL, but and then they just don't have a ton of salary commitments. So once again, they're going to enter the offseason with the ability to have to go spend some money. And Ha-Seong Kim is out there. It's assuming the mutual option doesn't happen, which those never do. Best friends with Jung-Hoo Lee, and so there's decent. He's an attractive piece for a team like the Giants. And then there's like a Willie Adames out there. And Corbin Burns is from California, and I believe he went to college in the Bay Area. And so they have money to spend once again. But I think the biggest development of the year has been the breakout seasons for Ramos and Fitzgerald. It's just a matter of can they continue to do that? And can they have a big offseason and just kind of try again? And again, I just want to reemphasize Jorge Soler wasn't good. I think that was more about like this team is willing to take that whole contract away from us. Like let's just get it wasn't like he was great and they sold. It was more like the Braves took the whole contract, and I think the Giants just couldn't turn that down because he just wasn't really that good. And he hasn't been very good for Atlanta either.
Yeah. But maybe in the playoffs he will be, as we've seen in the past.
That's true. He can get hot and be a monster.
Absolutely. We'll finish talking about some of the Giants and Padres players, including the fact that the Padres have been pulling their own San Francisco Giants moves this year. I'm going to explain what that means and also break down the pitching matchups in just a second, folks. But first, I need to talk to you guys about PrizePicks. It is the #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And it's easy. It's very easy. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 stat player projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you guys might have heard the NFL season is back, and they've got, oh man, brace yourselves for this one, folks, a great promotion. 1 passing yard from Caleb Williams gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard. For my non-football folk, which if you're in the United States, frankly, I don't know how you, even if you don't like football, know how it works, but 1 yard is basically nothing. So it's practically an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. You don't want to miss out. You can 100 times your money using PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get in on the action. And also in others, it's available in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And they've got all these community tabs if you want to play with MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley, Drewski, Joe Budden. They're part of this bad boy too, and they're part of the PrizePicks community. So you're gonna want to check that out, guys. It is fan flippin' tastic. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. So check that out. The Caleb Williams thing and this thing that I just mentioned to you, they are giving you all the promotions out here. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Giants podcast. Before the break, I mentioned, what has the what is the Giants vibe for the Padres? What I mean by that is they have successfully taken some players that nobody was really thinking about, and they're having amazing seasons. Now, I will say, in the case of Donovan Solano, your boy, you talked about it. We talked about it before the season. One of the more beloved, fun stories, the fan legend in Donovan Solano, and he's been awesome for the Padres this year. And I say he's not as out of nowhere as some other players because, in fairness, I don't know why this guy wasn't signed in the offseason. It's not like he was old and his last year was disappointing. No, he was still good last year. So it was really weird that the Padres were able to just find him and be a really productive hitter for them. 117 WRC plus this year. He has been slipping as of late just a little bit, but just a solid bat. And then you could bring him off the bench and all that stuff. And then they've had Jurickson Profar, which is the Darren Ruff, I think, in this situation. And then you've had Kyle Higashioka, who's been awesome this year for sure, and in an offensive way that we didn't see coming. And then also with guys like, you've got Arise too, but then David Peralta, that's a very Giants like type of thing to happen. 115 WRC plus for him this year. He was a spectacular fill-in for when Fernando Tatis Jr. was hurt, and obviously he is back now. But nice bounce back season for him. He hasn't had that 150 WRC plus since 2018. So this Padres team, maybe they're figuring out some things. They've been really a lot better at accumulating depth, which is the one thing we always talk about. These two teams can learn from each other. So I think that's been the story of this Padres season is, yes, hitting better in high leverage, but it's also the fact that they were able to just find solid players more than usual. And this is usually a team that batters just don't seem to get all that much better for the Padres. So that's the story this year, is the unexpected guys. And then the rookie breakout of Jackson Merrill, who at this point, it's no longer a mirage. It wasn't just a hot 2 weeks. It's been a hot month, and it looks like he's discovered something with his power, being as dynamic of a player that you could hope for, especially one that was a shortstop, and now he's a center fielder, and he didn't even play the position before. He's been awesome, and personally, I think we're getting to the point where he very much has to be the rookie of the year, but that's just me. Let's talk about pitching matchups, Ben. Let's do this. I don't know exactly what that sound is in the background, but we ride.
I apologize.
Anyway, it's all good. It's totally good. Let us begin with Friday's matchup. It is Michael King, the king of all. And hey, here's the thing. Padres, they traded Juan Soto. Low-key did about as good as you could possibly hope for, on top of some depth pieces in Randy Vasquez and Johnny Brito. You also got Kyle Higashioka, who's been basically the starting catcher and been awesome this year. And then you got Michael King, who has currently a 3.17 ERA. He's got 177 strikeouts on the year. He might be like a top 10 Cy Young finisher, which is really cool. Possibly even top 5, actually, depending on how he finishes. He's been great. He's been electric. And then, of course, also in that trade, they got the prospect that they sent for Drew Thorpe. So basically been on bragging, and it's been great. But what can you tell us about Mason Black, who is the pitcher opposite of Michael King for tonight's game?
Well, I can tell you that he is a rookie, and the numbers aren't going to look good if you just check out his performance at the major league level in 5 games this year. He's got a 7.45 ERA, expected ERA, and again, I apologize for the buzzsaw outside. 7.61 expected ERA. Not sure I said that, but they're high on this guy, and I can see why. He's got kind of a funky low 3/4 arm slot, which gives him a lot of like sinking movement on his fastball. He's got he throws a 4-seamer, a sinker, a slider, which his slider is his primary pitch, and mixes in a changeup as well. So his last outing was actually quite solid. There was like an error committed behind it. I call it an error, but it wasn't
Mhm,
ruled an error, and then a home run followed. But other than that, he went 5 innings, no walks, 6 strikeouts. It was against the Marlins, granted, 4 hits. But that was his first outing in the major league since May, and so
mhm,
he's kind of come back and they're quite high on him. And so, the Padres could rough him up. I wouldn't be surprised if they rough him up, and I also
mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if he gives them, 5 solid innings. Yeah.
We love that. We love to hear that, because I like that you acknowledge that he's going to be absolutely obliterated tonight. Unfortunately for him, if he was a lefty, ask him to change to just being a lefty for one day, and you might actually be able to hit this Padres lineup. It's still very good. Don't get me wrong; they have improved their numbers against lefties, but that is something to watch out for the Padres. Is they've made less than remarkable starting pitchers who are lefties look very, very good at times this year. So not an advantage for the Giants, it seems. But Michael King, that is a great matchup. I'm really curious to see how he goes. This is a guy who has all the strikeout potential in the world, and he started awful for the beginning of the year. Could not stop giving up home runs. Ever since then, been a lot better. Just as a pitcher overall, his pitch usage has balanced out. It used to be all over the place. He didn't know, probably because he was just transitioning into being a full time starter for the first time. So he's been great. Saturday's matchup is one to watch, folks. This is, if you're just a fan of baseball, if you don't care, if you're a Giants fan who's like, you know what, we're not making the playoffs, I don't want to watch, you might want to watch this game. It is Logan Webb versus Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease for the Padres, 12-10 record on the year, which is like, it's just funny because it just shows you, one, that wins don't matter, but it's just like, this has been a team that very bizarrely doesn't always perform offensively for Dylan Cease. Granted, though, he's been a little bit of a tale of two cities this year. Great pitcher, don't get me wrong, and as automatic with his 200 innings as you can ask for. He's been good for a long time, great strikeout rate, but it's been a little bit up and down. We have to see. He might be ready to go into the ace Dylan Cease mode just based on his, past few starts. He's given up a few runs in his last ones, but as you might have heard, threw a no hitter last month. That was awesome, or 2 months ago, I guess, at this point. It was basically untouchable that whole July. That was great. And then in August has been good, but not great. So maybe he's ready to go back into ace mode. We're going to have to see. He's the type of guy that you don't know exactly which version of him you're going to get, even though whatever version is probably going to be good. You just don't know exactly what. And then Logan Webb. Logan Webb is like, I'm going to use another football analogy. He's like the Mike Evans of ace pitchers in Major League Baseball. What I mean by that is you're in your draft, you're talking about ace level pitchers. No one's ever the most excited to be like, I got Logan Webb. Is he just as good as a lot of these other guys? Yeah, because this is a dude who has had like basically good numbers ever since 2021. He had a 3.03 ERA that year. And if you look at FIP, he has not had a FIP greater than 3.16 over these last few years. That is outstanding. A little bit of an indictment on the Giants defense, but yes, he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, and he is a maddening pitcher to watch. This is a guy that toys with you. And that's why I kind of enjoy him. He's the baseball hipster fan favorite, but Logan Webb, how has it been like having him on the Giants this season? Feels like the one bright spot you can always rely on.
Yeah, just steady Eddie. Kind of reminds me of like Matt Cain of
Mm,
his heyday, just in terms of the demeanor and not always gonna wow you with, never gonna wow you really with like strikeout stuff necessarily, but heavy ground ball rate, like
hmm
one of the best, if
Yeah.
not the best, year in and year out. So the ball's on the ground. Another reason Matt Chapman has a lot of value to the Giants because of the defense. But yeah, it's great. He's had a little bit of an inconsistent season. He's been really dominant in terms
hmm
of like preventing runs, and then he's had some stretches where he's allowed quite a few runs, including
hmm
his last outing against the Marlins. I think he gave up 5 in 5 innings or so. And so
hmm
it's been a little bit inconsistent. I think the ERA is a little higher than it's been in some other recent seasons, but at the end of the day, like he's just about as reliable as it gets. And he's an innings eater. Like
Yeah. hmm
he's if not leading the league, he's up there every year.
Every single year. And low key, look, the Giants, we have some questions about the front office. An amazing contract, but dare I say a steal. 5 years, 90 million. Obviously, that's not no Trump change, but for you to get that, this is a guy to me that should be costing like a 5 years, 150. That's what I thought Logan Webb would go for. Because if Robbie Ray's going to go for that much, then yeah, Logan Webb would. But you know, That's where we are. So that is one good thing going for the Giants. And then the last pitching matchup of the series, Joe Musgrove versus Kyle Harrison. Intriguing if you're sickos like us, right? For the Padres perspective, Musgrove, he looks like he's fully back. He looks like he's fully back. Yes, he wasn't amazing in every single start since he came back, the August 18th start against the Rockies, but in my opinion, whatever. At Colorado is always weird. But last start, 6 innings, no earned runs, 8 strikeouts, and highest velocity of the season. That's what makes me think he is back. He's had a very tumultuous season. So I'd like to see it again and hopefully, be more confident that this guy can be what we hope he can be for this playoff rotation in the Padres. And I think that he's shown he's absolutely capable of that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But it looks like Joe Musgrove's back. It is not good to look at his ERA and all that stuff. All the numbers have been off because he clearly was just completely debilitated at the beginning of the year. Injuries, all that sort of stuff. So I would not, if I'm a Giants fan, look at that. I think is the usual Musgrove from years past that you'll be facing. And then there's Kyle Harrison, who it feels like the Giants needed a little bit more from him this year, or at least wanted maybe more from him this year. And instead, he seems like he's just been your average rookie, or it's like has shown some promise and whatnot. But what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, first and foremost, he just turned 23, and so this is a young pitcher, and he's had some starts where he's been dominant, and overall, before the last couple, he was overall kind of major league average, and being 22 years old for most of the season, he just turned 23. But in his last two starts, 7 1/3, 11 runs allowed, and so that's kind of blown things up a little bit, including his most recent outing, 2 2/3, 6 earned runs. Just got hit around by the D-backs, and then previously got hit around by the Marlins. Or excuse me, that's not the Marlins, the Brewers. And so, anyway, last two starts have been rough. His fastball is normally a really good pitch, and I believe it's been getting hit around a little bit lately. So he could be a guy, honestly, that they like shut down just to protect him, and because he's reached already a high career high in innings, and he's struggling right now, and so they could possibly call someone up to make that start, given this team appears almost certainly headed nowhere. So I wouldn't be shocked if he actually doesn't even make that start.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, this is just what happens sometimes. Not everybody can have a Jackson Merrill like rookie season. It happens. We are all mortal, I guess, but still looking forward to seeing whatever happens in that matchup and whatever happens in this series. It's always fun playing the Giants as a division rivalry, even though it's a friendly rivalry. I really don't have any beef. We've always said this. It's not the same. It's Dodgers. It really is. We all need to team up the way like you're playing Super Smash Brothers with your friends, and you realize your one friend has 3 stocks left, so you have to go after them. That's what people should be doing. You know what I mean? That's how we feel about the Dodgers and stuff.
Yeah.
But as always, Ben, it is a delight. If you'd like to plug anything for the good people out there, go ahead.
I always say
I know.
no.
I know.
Do you have anything to
like
plug? I'm
doing
like,
this.
no.
I know. I feel like it's a good
Twitter
bit at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick, and that's really the only. I'm active there, so follow me there. And what about you? Where can my listeners find you? And what do you do?
Absolutely. At Javapeno, JAVIIPENO on Twitter, where I tweet about a bunch of things, mostly the Padres, but go check that out. Been a lot of fun over there. And then also check out at LO_Padres for updates on the show. I am finally overcoming my sickness that kept me on the IL, the 10-day IL, last week especially. I'm still a little bit rough around the edges, I guess, right now, but look forward to that next week. Going to be doing a mailbag and, of course, diving deep into whatever happens in this playoff race. Maybe can they win the division still? Is it possible? It's possible. I don't know if it can happen, but that is one thing to look out for. It's going to be a really fun finish the season for the Padres. So go check that out. And of course, follow Ben too.
And can the Giants play spoiler? That's kind of where they're at right now.
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
know.
can they spoil? Because it's close. Like with the Braves and the Mets, kind of. You got the Mets playing well and creeping up on the D-backs and Padres. So that's
seriously.
what the Giants are playing for, is to spoil some parties here.
We'll have to see, man. I mean, the Mets have the MVP of baseball this season, so we're gonna have to see how that pans out. Yeah, right. At least in my opinion, no bias whatsoever. Everyone, go check that out. Until next time, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies, and stay gregarious, my Giants homies. I don't know why that's always the word that comes to mind, but stay care, guys. Enjoy the series.